What happens when 6 months of sacrifice, overtime shifts, and a father's love are destroyed in seconds by the careless hands of visiting relatives? This is the story of Marcus, a single father who saved every penny to give his son the gift of a lifetime, only to watch it crumble before his eyes while laughter echoed through his living room. What Marcus did next shocked everyone in his family and sparked a debate that divided opinions across the country. Was he right? Was he wrong? By the end of this story, you'll need to decide for yourself. Marcus Henderson lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, where the winters were harsh and the summer humidity clung to everything like a second skin. The building was old, with cracked paint on the hallways and a radiator that clanged through the night. But it was home. Marcus worked as a warehouse supervisor at a logistics company on the outskirts of the city, a job that paid enough to keep the lights on and food on the table, but never quite enough for extras. His son, 12-year-old Ethan, was everything to him. After Marcus's divorce 3 years earlier, Ethan had been his anchor, his reason to keep pushing forward. The boy was quiet, thoughtful, and had developed a deep passion for gaming and computer programming. He would spend hours watching YouTube tutorials on how to build computers, sketching designs in his notebook, talking excitedly about graphics cards, processors, and cooling systems, with a knowledge that impressed even Marcus. For Ethan's 13th birthday, Marcus made a decision. He would build his son the custom gaming PC he'd been dreaming about. Not a cheap, pre-built model, but a real custom rig with carefully selected components. Marcus researched for weeks, making lists, comparing prices, watching the same tutorials his son watched. The total cost would be $1,547, a fortune for a single father living paycheck to paycheck. So Marcus made sacrifices. He picked up every overtime shift available, working 12-hour days, sometimes 6 days a week. He stopped eating lunch at the diner near work and brought leftovers in Tupperware instead. He cancelled his streaming subscriptions, stopped buying coffee on his morning commute, and wore the same 3 work shirts in rotation until they were nearly threadbare. His back ached from the long hours lifting boxes, and his feet throbbed every night. But every time he deposited money into his savings account, he pictured Ethan's face lighting up. His younger brother Derek knew about the plan. Derek lived 40 minutes away in the suburbs with his wife, Melissa, and their 3 children, ages 7, 9, and 10. Derek had always been the lucky one in the family, landing a comfortable corporate job, buying a house with a backyard, taking vacations to Florida. But there had always been tension between them. Derek thought Marcus was too strict with Ethan, too focused on discipline and structure. Marcus thought Derek was too permissive with his kids, letting them run wild without consequences. Still, they were family. And when Derek mentioned wanting to visit one Saturday afternoon in late September, Marcus agreed, even though it meant taking time away from a potential overtime shift. 6 months after Marcus began saving, he finally had enough. On a cloudy Saturday morning, he drove to the computer store downtown, his heart pounding with excitement. He'd ordered most of the components online over the past weeks, waiting for sales, using coupon codes, maximizing every dollar. But today was the day he'd pick up the final pieces. The case, a sleek black tower with tempered glass panels and RGB lighting, and the graphics card, the crown jewel of the build. Back at the apartment, Marcus and Ethan spent the entire afternoon assembling the computer together. It was a bonding experience Marcus would never forget. Ethan's hands trembled with excitement as he carefully installed the RAM sticks, his eyes wide with wonder as Marcus showed him how to apply thermal paste to the processor. They worked methodically, following the instruction manuals, double-checking every connection. When they finally pressed the power button and the computer hummed to life, the RGB fans casting a soft rainbow glow across the room, Ethan hugged his father so tightly, Marcus felt tears welling up in his eyes. The boy whispered, "Thank you," over and over, his voice breaking with emotion. In that moment, every painful hour of overtime, every skipped meal, every aching muscle was worth it. For 2 glorious weeks, Ethan used his new computer every evening after homework. He was responsible with it, careful, treating it like the precious gift it was. He joined online communities, started learning to code in Python, made friends with other young programmers across the country. Marcus would stand in the doorway of Ethan's small bedroom, watching his son's face illuminated by the monitor's glow, and feel a profound sense of accomplishment. Then Derek called. He wanted to visit that Sunday, bring the family over for a casual afternoon. Melissa missed seeing them, and the kids were asking about their cousin Ethan. Marcus hesitated. Derek's children, Tyler, Zoe, and Brandon, were energetic, to put it mildly. They were the kind of kids who touched everything, who didn't understand the word careful, who left a trail of chaos wherever they went. But Derek was his brother, and Marcus didn't want to seem unwelcoming. He agreed, but with one condition. The kids needed to be supervised, especially around Ethan's new computer. Derek laughed it off, saying Marcus worried too much, that they were just kids being kids. Marcus felt a knot forming in his stomach, but he pushed it aside. What could really go wrong in a few hours? Sunday arrived with unseasonably warm weather for October in Cleveland. The leaves on the trees lining Marcus's street had turned brilliant shades of orange and red, and the afternoon sun streamed through the apartment windows. Derek's family arrived just after noon in their large SUV, the kids bursting out of the vehicle with the energy of children who'd been cooped up for too long. The afternoon started pleasantly enough. Marcus grilled burgers on his small balcony, while Derek sat in a folding chair, drinking beer and talking about his recent promotion at work. Melissa helped set the table, and the kids ran around the apartment, their voices echoing off the walls. Ethan, always the more reserved child, stayed close to his father, occasionally glancing nervously toward his bedroom where his precious computer sat. After lunch, Ethan reluctantly agreed to show his cousins his new setup. Marcus specifically told Derek to make sure the kids didn't touch anything, that they could look but not play. Derek nodded absently, already distracted by the football game playing on Marcus's small television. What happened next occurred in less than 5 minutes, but it would fracture their family for years to come. Ethan showed his cousins the computer, explaining the specs with pride, pointing out the components he and his father had installed together. The 3 younger children pressed their faces against the tempered glass side panel, their breath fogging the surface. Tyler, the oldest at 10, asked if he could play a game. Ethan politely said no, that the computer was new, and he wasn't allowed to let others use it yet. That's when the mood shifted. Tyler called Ethan selfish. Zoe started whining loudly that it wasn't fair. Brandon, the youngest at 7, reached out and poked the keyboard repeatedly. Ethan asked them to stop, his voice rising with anxiety. He tried to gently guide them out of his room, but Tyler pushed past him, reaching for the mouse. In the living room, Marcus heard the commotion. He started walking toward the bedrooms, calling out for the kids to settle down. Derek barely looked up from the game, mumbling something about kids working it out themselves. What Marcus walked into made his blood run cold. Tyler was holding a hammer, one from the toolbox Marcus kept in the hallway closet. The boy had a defiant look on his face, angry at being told he couldn't play. Zoe and Brandon were laughing, egging him on, saying, "Do it! Do it!" Ethan stood frozen, his face pale with terror. Before Marcus could cross the room, Tyler swung the hammer into the tempered glass side panel. The sound was deafening, like a gunshot in the small space. The glass exploded into thousands of pieces, some flying into the computer's interior, others scattering across the floor. But Tyler didn't stop. He swung again, this time hitting the graphics card, the impact bending the metal bracket and cracking the circuit board. Again and again, while his younger siblings laughed and cheered as if it were a game. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing Tyler's wrist and wrenching the hammer away. He was shaking, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. Derek finally appeared in the doorway, asking what all the noise was about. Melissa was behind him, her phone still in her hand. Ethan stood amid the wreckage, tears streaming down his face, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The computer, 6 months of sacrifice made physical, was destroyed. Shards of glass glittered in the RGB lighting that still somehow flickered weakly. The graphics card hung at an odd angle, clearly beyond repair. The motherboard had visible damage where the hammer had struck through the destroyed side panel. The apartment fell silent except for Ethan's quiet sobbing. What happened in the next 20 minutes would become the subject of heated family arguments for years. Marcus, still holding the hammer, turned to Derek with a look his brother had never seen before. His voice was quiet, deadly calm, as he asked Derek if he saw what his children had just done. Derek looked uncomfortable, glancing at the destroyed computer, at his son Tyler, who now seemed to realize the gravity of what he'd done, at Melissa, who was pulling the younger children behind her. Derek's response ignited everything. He said it was just a computer, that Marcus was overreacting, that kids make mistakes, and this was an accident. An accident. That word hung in the air like poison. Marcus repeated it slowly, asking how 3 children, one with a hammer, destroying something while laughing loudly, could possibly be called an accident. This was deliberate. This was destruction. Melissa jumped in, her voice defensive, saying that Marcus should have put the hammer away where children couldn't reach it, that it was partially his fault for not child-proofing his apartment when he knew kids were visiting. The blame shifting made something snap inside Marcus. He told them all to leave, immediately, his voice now rising. Derek protested, saying they needed to talk about this like adults, that Marcus was being dramatic. Marcus then did something that shocked everyone. He pulled out his phone and took photos of the destroyed computer from multiple angles. He told Derek that the computer cost $1,547, that he wanted to be reimbursed in full within 30 days, or he would take Derek to small claims court. He had the receipts, the proof of purchase for every component, time-stamped messages to Derek about the computer, everything he needed. Derek's face turned red. He called Marcus insane, said he wasn't paying for anything, that it was an accident, and Marcus was being vindictive and petty. Melissa grabbed her purse, ushering the children toward the door, now crying herself, saying she couldn't believe Marcus would threaten to sue his own brother over material possessions. Tyler stood near the door, tears finally coming, mumbling that he was sorry, but Derek shushed him, saying he had nothing to apologize for. As they left, Derek turned in the doorway and said something that cut deep. He told Marcus that this is why Marcus's ex-wife left him, because he was rigid, unforgiving, and cared more about things than people. He said Marcus was teaching Ethan to be materialistic and cold. Then they were gone, the slam of the apartment door echoing through the rooms. Marcus stood in the sudden silence, still holding his phone, still trembling with anger and hurt. Ethan emerged from his bedroom, having heard everything, and wrapped his arms around his father's waist. The boy apologized, saying this was his fault, that he should have never let them in his room. Marcus held his son tightly, telling him none of this was his fault, that he did nothing wrong, that sometimes grown-ups fail to teach their children right from wrong, and consequences have to follow. That night, Marcus compiled all his documentation. Receipts, photos, time-stamped messages. He drafted a formal demand letter outlining the destruction, the cost, and the 30-day deadline for reimbursement. He sent it via certified mail the next morning. Derek never responded. 28 days later, Marcus filed a small claims court case against his brother. The small claims court hearing took place on a grey December morning in Cleveland. in a nondescript government building downtown, where fluorescent lights buzzed overhead and the smell of burnt coffee filled the hallways. Marcus arrived early with Ethan, both dressed in their church clothes. Derek and Melissa arrived 15 minutes late, looking annoyed at having to be there at all. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and no-nonsense demeanor, listened to both sides. Marcus presented his evidence methodically, the receipts showing the cost of each component, totaling $1,547. The photos of the destroyed computer, showing the shattered glass, the damaged graphics card, the bent components, the timestamp messages where Marcus had specifically told Derek to supervise the children around the computer, a printed bank statement showing the 6 months of deposits from overtime pay, highlighting his sacrifice. Marcus spoke calmly, explaining that this wasn't just about money, it was about accountability. His brother's children had deliberately destroyed property while being supervised by their parents, who did nothing to stop it and refused to take responsibility afterward. He emphasized the word deliberately, reminding the court that the children were laughing, that one wielded a hammer obtained from Marcus's own closet, that this lasted several minutes before Marcus could intervene. Derek's defense was weak. He argued that children don't understand the value of expensive items, that Tyler didn't mean to cause so much damage, that Marcus was tearing the family apart over something that could be resolved privately. He claimed Marcus was partially at fault for not securing the hammer, for leaving expensive equipment accessible to children, for not supervising closely enough. Melissa testified that Marcus had always been judgmental of their parenting style, that this lawsuit was really about long-standing family resentment, not the computer. The judge asked Derek a single devastating question. Did you offer to replace or repair the damaged property at any point after the incident? Derek hesitated, then admitted he had not. The judge asked why. Derek said he didn't feel he should be held financially responsible for an accident. The judge pointed out that the evidence showed this was not an accident, but rather unsupervised children acting destructively while the responsible adults failed to intervene. The ruling came swiftly. The judge found in Marcus's favor for the full amount of $1,547 plus court costs. She stated for the record that parents are responsible for the actions of their minor children, especially when those actions result in property damage, and that Derek's failure to supervise or later make amends demonstrated a clear lack of accountability. She noted that Marcus had taken reasonable steps to protect his property by verbally warning Derek, and that Derek's children accessed a tool and used it as a weapon against property, which constituted intentional destruction, not an accident. Derek's face went white as the judgment was entered. Melissa grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. As they filed out of the courtroom, Derek looked at Marcus with something between hatred and betrayal. He said quietly, so only Marcus could hear, that they were no longer brothers, that this was unforgivable, that Marcus had chosen money over family. Marcus watched them leave, feeling no triumph, only a hollow sadness. Ethan squeezed his father's hand, asking if they did the right thing. Marcus told him yes, that sometimes doing the right thing costs us relationships, but that doesn't make it wrong. He explained that teaching Ethan to stand up for himself, to demand accountability, to value his own worth and the worth of his possessions earned through honest labor, was more important than maintaining a false peace with people who refused to acknowledge wrongdoing. Derek paid the judgment in full 6 weeks later, the money arriving via cashier's check with no note, no apology, no acknowledgement. Marcus used the money to rebuild the computer with Ethan, an experience somehow more bittersweet than the first time. The family never reconciled. 3 years later, they still haven't spoken. Family gatherings are now divided, with relatives forced to choose sides. Some say Marcus was right to demand accountability. Others say he destroyed his family over a material object. The computer still sits in Ethan's room, now in his teenage years, still working perfectly. But every time Marcus looks at it, he wonders about the true cost of justice and whether some bridges, once burned, can ever be rebuilt. So here's where you come in. Was Marcus right to take his brother to court? Should he have just let it go to preserve family harmony? Were Derek and Melissa responsible for their children's actions, or was this truly just an unfortunate accident blown out of proportion? This story divides people every time it's told. Some see a father protecting his son and teaching him about accountability. Others see a man who valued money over blood. What do you see? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Be honest, be respectful, but tell us where you stand. And if you found this story as thought-provoking as we did, hit that subscribe button. We bring you real stories about real conflicts that make you question what you would do in the same situation. These aren't fairy tales. This is life, complicated and messy, where right and wrong aren't always clear. Before you go, check out the next video recommended on your screen. Another incredible true story that'll make you think, feel, and maybe see the world a little differently. We'll see you there.